Word of the day, acumen. Acumen refers to the keenness and depth of perception, discernment, or discrimination. In other words, the ability to think clearly and make good decisions, especially in practical matters. I mean, that don't sound like a lot of people in the sports landscape now just because everything gotta be an argument. I wonder if my headphones, is my music coming through? There he is. I'm not wearing my headphones today because they're uncomfortable and it's hot in here, but you can hear the music now. Okay, we good. That was a goofy way to start the live, but guess what? Welcome back to Chopping of a P. Scott. I'm Prescott Kelly. Today is Friday, August 9th. Glad to have you back with us. On today's episode, it's really a recap of Skip Bayless's career, what he's meant to the sports media landscape. We're also just going to kind of kick it off, be live, have fun for a bit. I got about an hour to mess around. So if you have any topics you want to throw into the chat, please do. Before we get too far into it, once again, make sure you like, share, subscribe. The audio platform, you guys have been crushing it recently. The reviews and the ratings have been pretty stagnant. But whatever audio platform that you listen on, when I do post those or post the actual audio representation of it, please make sure to smash those 5-star reviews. Tell your friends about hide your kids, hide your eyes, because we've been consistent, but it hasn't grown as much as I was hoping over the past like 2 or 3 months. And football season's on the horizon, so I feel like it's going to tick back up again. Before we also get in, make sure you support Mackenzie Brooks of the Mac Truck Podcast, Paul Wizzo of Wizzo Talks, and Nick Stevenson of the Houston Sports State of the Union Podcast as well. And before we get into my not even an ode to Skip Bayless, before we kind of give him his flowers, which I've never really done, just because I don't really appreciate the representation of sports debate. I feel like it's a very dumb way of doing sports, but to think that he hasn't left his imprint on how we debate sports would be, I'd be remiss to even acknowledge that. But we'll go into a deeper dive in just a moment. But what I first wanted to do was give a huge congratulations and shout out to my boy Nick Stevenson, who to me has been like the brother I've never had. I have 3 sisters. I have 3 awesome sisters, a great family, but I never got a chance to be a brother or have one. And with Nick, just a little backstory, just to give him his flowers and really show my love for him and what he's done for me, and hopefully what I've, even in the most minuscule amount, has been able to help him with is me and Nick share the same birthday. We're the exact same age. I was born in Texas. He still lives there. And the Houston Rockets and that version with Barkley was, well, Phoenix Suns Barkley was my favorite player growing up, but I became a Rockets fan when he moved over there. So they had him and Clyde and Hakeem. I followed the team very closely. I was an Astros fan growing up when I was, a toddler before all the scandals and stuff. But we've grown really close. And to see him at this stage and rebrand, he had the Smells Like Middle-Aged Spirit podcast that he was doing with multiple people, and people grow up, they grow apart, and that thing dissipated, but he rebranded. He took some time off, and he's back into the podcast game now with the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. That is a Houston, Texas based sports podcast, right? He covers the Rockets, the Texans, and the Astros, like really exclusively. And he had the opportunity to get Rock the Mic, which is for Houston, ESPN Houston, which is crazy. So there was this competition of, the top 2 or 3 most likes and views on a YouTube channel gets like an automatic bid. So he automatically moves on to the next round of this Rock the Mic ESPN Houston sports, podcast and journey, which I think is awesome because I don't know what his intentions were going through with this and like what the mindset is, because I know that us in this industry, you can have mixed emotions about what you think is what the outcome can be, but the resilience to rebrand, redo it, I'm really proud of him. He made the cut. He's moving on to the next round. And I'm really proud of him rebranding and getting his name back into this market. And just his wife was like, you need to go for this. You need to get back into this in this capacity, in this market, and nail it. And he has. And I'm super proud of Nick. And I wish you nothing but the best going forward, my man. So now what I want to do, that was enough lovey-dovey stuff. I got to move on now. So Skip Bayless decides to go ahead and step down from Fox Sports, which he's gotten pushed out from ESPN, and now it seems, I don't want to say necessarily that Fox was pushing him out, but him and Skip obviously had this weird dynamic towards the end where, now as somebody who doesn't, I need to preface this with the fact that I don't watch Fox Sports really at all. In fact, the only person I really listen to, and not even regularly, is Nick Wright. And we'll get to him in a moment. But Skip has always had these very abrasive opinions, right? But when he was a little bit younger, it felt like there was always like the animosity towards, Braun, or if he spoke out of turn on certain things, right? I get the same vibe with Stephen A. Smith. Is when Skip used to talk hoops, I didn't really mind it with you when he was at ESPN. And kind of the same thing with Stephen A. Smith. I can tolerate them because I know that they, at least it felt like there was some kind of knowledge behind it. There was some experience, even though when you look at their high school and college stats, it's nothing to be impressed by. And the old adage has been, well, those who can't do teach, those who can't play coach. So in theory, those two guys who had no statistical value whatsoever at the high school and collegiate levels, you'd think they'd be the goats at what they do. And Stephen A. Smith, even if you don't agree with what he has to say in large part, entertainment wise, there isn't really anybody who, there's no real comp for him. And when you go back to even with Skip's kind of in that same boat where, without going too far on a tangent, we've seen Skip, there's a lot of stammering, there's a lot of getting off topic, there is a lot of just some concerning, I think is the wrong word and too strong of a word. But it gets to a point where like this is kind of a tough watch, regardless of what's going on. And regardless of what was going on with him and Shannon Sharpe back in the day before they ultimately dissolved their on-air marriage, was it's kind of a tough watch just seeing somebody who's that far in their career. As politicians right now are the same boat. We've had that go on. It's the same. It's a not quite the exact same, but you can draw the parallel because I look at it with guys like Dirk Nowitzki. At the very end of his career, it was like, man, this is a tough watch to watch you play basketball, man. So Skip had a little bit of that with me. That was that feel of his delivery and presentation. And just when you don't know what you're talking about, you're using words, you're just trying to fill space because you're on every single day. And I think that that's the most, when it comes to having a daily talk show, doesn't even have to just be sports related, but when you're doing a daily content show, like Skip has been doing for a long time, what you end up learning that you can hit certain notes. You can just kind of bumble and stumble your way through certain things because there's always going to be the well of consumption from the consumers, where Dallas Cowboys, automatically your numbers jump. If you're going to talk Cowboys football, they're going to jump because either A, you are over the moon infatuated with them, or you just love watching their fans suffer. You love the Weedham boys and roast them. That always gets you ratings. MJ versus Braun, that's always going to get you ratings. Mahomes versus Brady. Like, there's just certain things where you go to the well too many times, and if you've got nothing else in the arsenal, it doesn't bring in any new listeners, new viewers, new content, right? But you can play the hits, and it feels like that's what Skip has been leaning on for so long. Because again, to rephrase, I don't watch their shows, but when I go through my social time feed, it feels like it is an overwhelming majority of still going back to Braun versus MJ. But to get back more to the impact that he had, because now I'm just going off on him as opposed to what he's left. I remember when I was a kid and I used to see Skip Bayless, and just like these new TV personalities to me, I guess. Debate television is not a new thing. It just feels like we got to a point where it got perfected, and it felt like Skip was at the forefront of debate sports television. And we, then the internet really starts to take off. It's the early 2000s. We really start to get this momentum of, I can say whatever I want to you, and you're going to see it. It's going to pop up in your notifications. You're going to get riled up, and then we can debate. And at first it's fun, and then it becomes vitriol and everything like that, because that's just how the evolution of all this works. It starts in one form, and then it evolves, good, bad, or indifferent, into something more extreme. So sports debate television initially was just, oh, look at these guys arguing about stuff. And there's the example that I've overheard is the comparison of Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon. Well, they've been able to perfect it. They haven't perfected it by my metrics, because they largely agree with each other. If you watch Pardon the Interruption, it is them being more old-timey, reminiscing about things that used to happen back in their day, and largely agreeing, but their tone is just, it's debate style television, but there's not a whole lot of indifference. There's not a whole lot of challenging each other. It's just, you and I are going to talk in this elevated tone and be the old guy doing this show. So that's the comp that I've gotten is, well, PTI's made it work, and they make it work because it's just two people who have a high energy, and they're also not in the same, they're not in the same room. I think is a very important distinction is they're, especially it's like post pandemic. Absolutely. Cause I have watched PTI. When I do catch it, it's always Kornheiser's in his house and Wilbon's in Bristol, I believe is where the actual set is. Those two guys aren't even in the same room. Shannon Skip towards the end in the same room, having the undermining thoughts of Skip Bayless would wear on you after a while. I could only imagine. But I said I would say some good things about Skip, and I need to do that. He did bring to light something that, for good, bad, or indifferent, brought a lot of prosperity to ESPN and then to Fox as far as debate television works. You telling me that you know that something is correct, right? This is your viewpoint. Wrong. Nope, I see it completely differently. And you can lay out your argument, you can rebut. At the end of the day, when you have a strong opinion on something, you're most likely not going to move, whether it be sports, politics, or just whatever social issues, whatever whatever situation you want to throw out. If you firmly believe in something, there are certain aspects of life that you are not willing to move off of. And that's where the comes in. Skip was the master of doesn't matter. You can say it's bad television. I think it's bad television. Again, I would rather have an actual conversation. I'd rather be able to bounce ideas off each other. And you think this is a good idea? Okay, well, I can agree on certain points, unless it's just like all out ridiculous stuff that goes against all human values. I'm willing to listen to just about damn near anything. So if you want to make arguments, and because this is now a Skip homage, if you will, is I don't believe, again, the whole top five, the whole debate thing, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't appeal to me in any form or fashion to have those types of conversations, because I think that they're irrelevant. They are subjective. And if you are somebody who digs that deep into a certain lane, you aren't going to move off of it. But what he has done is created the culture of, and he was ahead of his time with it. I feel like when you have certain people who have a way of the outside the box thinking and bringing up certain stats that you didn't think of, or, well, in that run, did you think about this guy getting injured and how that changed the narrative of, doesn't matter. Once you're dug into a certain take with MJ or Braun or whoever it is, you're largely fully ingrained and you're fully entrenched in that take. And he gave power to those types of people to continue on and pass the torch on, whether not a whole lot of people have been able to perfect it the way that Skip did. Again, the latter years, to me, it just didn't seem like he had it. He kind of peter out when I would see certain clips of him. People would just completely call him out on certain things. You get that when you start to lose your edge, or when you lost your, you're not intaking new information. You're just living in the moment of what you remember things to be. You get that sometimes. But there's a new wave of sports fans. There's a new wave of just the younger generation is digging kind of deeper into the old ways and saying there's some holes in some of these theories. We may not have watched them, but you only want us to watch certain things. And I almost kind of draw this parallel, and we're cross pollinating sports, but I look at it almost the same way that Skip Bayless and Nick Saban. Now, I'm not calling Skip Bayless the Nick Saban of sports media. That isn't what that is. But they both got out when they realized that the game had passed them by. And Skip can go do his own thing. That's the thing, is that once you built this brand, once you're that good, for lack of a better term, once you have to be good at it. Skip was great. Now he's not so much. But when you have the certain following and you've attracted the certain people who will ride or die with you. I'm not going to say the cults, because the cult classic and the cult following, because that isn't fair in that regard. Now, there are certain people who they will ride or die with Skip, and they'll say he's always right, never wrong. And though this isn't for that. But we get to a point where, oh man, I had something. I was feeling really good about it. Dang, I lost it. And I can't even go back and restart this thing because this is live. Hopefully I get my train of thought back. But when we'll pivot for a moment, because one of the other talking points I was going to have was about what the progression was going to be for Fox Sports going forward. And I think that a lot of people were really irritated with the fact that Nick Wright is supposed to be the face of Fox Sports, which you can be annoyed with Nick Wright all you want to. I understand it. Most people are kind of surprised when I tell them that I don't mind Nick Wright, because, Bills fan over here, he has his very much opinionated version of what Josh Allen is. I largely agree with it, because he's not saying that he's not terrible. And those are the words that don't come out of his mouth. Like I said, I don't watch anything, but I'll listen to his podcast every once in a while. He gives Josh Allen his flowers when he feels they're deserved, but he also criticizes him because, guess what? Spoiler alert, Josh Allen does deserve that criticism. So when I see people who are irritated with the fact that Fox Sports is now kind of pivoting from the one-sided version of Skip Bayless and now moving over to Nick Wright, I understand, because Nick has his agenda, if you will. He's a homer, obviously, for the Kansas City Chiefs and for LeBron, and that is going to put some people in a sour position, because they're both polarizing. The Kansas City Chiefs are polarizing, not even just because of Patrick Mahomes and his awesomeness, but because of Travis Kelce, and because he's with Taylor Swift, and because they've been awesome for half a decade now. That's one reason. Also because of LeBron, and he's in LA, they're in LA, LeBron's in LA. Like there's always going to be this connection of he has his own agenda. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Oh, I think I got back to it. Like, people thinking that Nick Wright's the face of Fox Sports, I don't believe that's true. I do think it's mostly Colin. At this point in time, Colin Cowherd has really kind of established himself, because he's been there longer. He used to be the staple of ESPN radio for a bit. I actually forget even why he left. I don't remember if he got fired. That was such a long time ago. But with Nick, I understand that the biggest thing for me is, when I do listen to him, the tone he's a hard listen. But I have also said this about my own voice, is when I hear my own voice going through, I don't like the way that I sound either. But enough of y'all do. We should like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews wherever you get your audio podcast pop. I just don't. I feel like there's a little bit of they want him to be more debative as a because they're used to that with Fox, and what Skip built with Undisputed is we need to be divisive. We need to be in this altercation all the time. And again, Nick does his own, he has his own show that is a debate show, but it's not. But they do the same thing. It's the same blueprint that Skip does. It's a lot of LeBron versus MJ. It's a lot of Mahomes versus Brady. It's just debate television. And if you're into that, then Fox Sports is their thing. I just don't feel like when it comes to the ambassador of Fox Sports, it doesn't feel necessarily like it's going to be Nick Wright and that's it. Although I would say if you're going to pick anybody from that platform, it's probably the best one that you have if it's going to end up being that way. One of the things I've always appreciated about, and you can think that their takes are wrong, and when you do this every single day, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, you are going to miss on a lot of stuff. You have to be prepared to swing and miss. You have to be prepared to take the social media bullets for getting these things wrong when you're supposed to be the expert. But you have to have content to fill. You're going to repeat yourself. You're going to have other things to fill just the time slot. It's a tough gig, and especially to do it on your own. As somebody who does it on my own, it's very difficult to be the editor, producer, the content creator, everything in between. It's a tough gig, and to do it for that long and that successfully you have to really appreciate what they've done. And that's the problem, or really the dynamic that Skip led the way from, or led the way through, is that pick a side. Pick a side, man. It's never been something that I've really been that interested in. Again, with debate television, debate sports, to me, it just feels like it's a very undermining way to do something that can be talked about at a higher level. If we all can't be the smart, the most smart and the best at whatever we do when it comes to this thing, where our evaluation of athletes, we think that we're good just because we can get on a keyboard, we can get on a computer, and we can just tell people, I think this guy's going to be good. But it always comes back. It's almost a direct correlation with you're spending so much time on your phone telling people how good you think that somebody's going to be. Eventually, you're going to be right. But you've put so much effort and so much content into the air that you're going to be wrong so many times that you just kind of bypass it and say, well, I got that one right. And that's what these guys are largely doing. But what they've done is they've created the mindset of pick a side, be divisive, stand strong in your take. To me, it just feels like I've just never been a part of it. I've never wanted to be a part of it. But this is another thing where Skip was a revolutionary in this. I can't tell you how many people I know when I scroll through my socials who are trying to be the next Skip Bayless. And I'm going to close out on this pretty shortly. There's one of these Facebook groups that I'm in, and there's a guy who constantly, he's trying to be the next Skip Bayless, is what his ultimate goal is. I can only imagine. Because with Skip, it's always about MJ's the best, MJ's the best. LeBron is whatever. There's always a diminishing factor. And it's always MJ, 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 but I don't hate LeBron, right? That's the caveat. It's always MJ, 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 but I don't hate LeBron. Sounds like you're kind of obsessed with him though, right? Like that's the vibe that these people give off. And there's a guy named Reggie who just was like, bro, you can't even just let Skip get his name off the door. You don't even have a shot with this thing anyways when it comes to taking over Skip's spot. But you just want to lean so far into, I'm going to be the next Skip Bayless. And Reggie's a shout out to, like, that's a closed circle thing. And if you know Reggie, let him know. We just got to get past, for me, I wish that this debate television never even existed. But if it's going to, you got to give your flower to the Godfather. The Godfather is Skip Bayless. And he says he's not hanging it up for good. He had mentioned that he's going to go on to do his own thing. And oh, Nick's in the building. Nick Stevenson. It's good to see you, my man. So I wish that you were here for most of what I had to say. I gave you your flowers and your shout out earlier, man. I'm really proud of what you did with the Rock the Mic with Houston, ESPN Houston, and want everybody. Skip serve me my latte this. So I'm over here trying to give some dap and some love to Skip Bayless, even though I think that he has been largely bad for sports. You cannot deny what he's meant to the sports media landscape. But Nick just comes in over the top. Not Nick Wright, but Nick Stevenson with the Skip serving my latte this morning. I love that you would do that, man. Because the pettiness, I'm over here trying to do like a really, well, I shouldn't even say that I was really trying to be cordial, because I have my fair share of criticisms with Mr. Bayless, but I do have this appreciation for just because I don't agree with what you do and how you do it doesn't mean that it didn't have its impact and its footprint on how we consume and how we engage in sports now. So as much as I don't agree with mostly everything that Skip Bayless has to say, his input, his impact, and his footprint really did have a lasting impression. Nick says, my bad, bro. I didn't mean to kill the vibe. No, you're good, man. I was actually just getting ready to wrap up. I've been going for like 30 minutes. I went on a little tangents about Nick Wright because he's supposed to be the face of. I don't need to recap. Everybody can listen to this on the audio podcast last time. But no, like you didn't kill the vibe, man. We were getting ready to wrap this thing up anyways. If you've got anything that you want my perspective on, you know what, tell you what, I'm gonna give you about 35, 40 seconds. If you got something you want my opinion on, throw it in the chat. If you're not, I'm getting ready to hang it up because this is bad audio for those that are going to listen to strictly the audio platform. Keep it going. Nick says, keep it going, bro. I'm going to listen back in a little bit. But no, I know that's what I'm saying, man. If you got new content, because I already said my piece about, I've already said, you know what everything I've got with the whole Fox Sports thing, I'm pretty much done with. So if you got something new, whether it's Olympic related or politics, where I don't even care what it is, we can just shoot from the hip right now. But I'm gonna let Nick, since Nick is with me live, I'm gonna give him the opportunity to throw something in my lap. And if I don't even care, it could be whatever. But I'm gonna give you about 10 seconds, and then I've been filibustering and just stammering. This is really good for the audio audience. I'm really glad that everybody who listens to me on the audio platform. I know I asked you earlier to like, share, subscribe, and then smash the 5-star reviews if you already listened. This is bad to keep that going, but please do. I greatly appreciate it. But Nick says he's proud of me too, and I appreciate my man. He goes, Texans beat the Steelers, so are we going to the Super Bowl? What was the score? What was the score in the Texans Steelers game? Because I knew that they played today, and I got a social media update that it said that Stephon Diggs was already acting out with CJ Stroud. I don't know if there was any truth to that. I scrolled through and I was at work and I saw that there was some elevated, between the two of them, it seemed like it was a little too intense for a preseason game. But it's also the fact that you have no idea what they said and there's just hand gestures. So like when you have, for example, NBA timeouts and you've got guys doing hand gestures and they're just being weird and they're saying you go here, and if this guy does this, you do this, and it seems like they're being more animated because they're trying to show you what's going on in their own eyes. They're being very Italian with their hand gestures. That's what I saw between CJ and Stephon, and it seemed like once I got to that specific video, it just seemed like people were already trying to put too much of a stress on the relationship between Diggs and Stroud already, when to me there was no context, there's no audio. I think people are just looking to start a fight with something that isn't even there. So Nick says, no, they were 20-12. That's good. And so I out of my periph, I saw part of this conversation. So I want to make sure that I read it in its entirety before it goes out. So what I was describing was going between CJ and Stefan. He goes, no, they were just chopping it up. Appreciate the indirect shout out. If it was two white guys, they would say they were getting the same pay. They were getting on the same page and they were competing. If it's two black guys, they must be fighting. It's wild how we just dumb it down to that, right? Because that's what I remember. I've seen that. We've seen that with Brady in offensive line. We see that Peyton Manning with Jeff Saturday, and they say, well, they're competitors, right? They're fiery competitors, and they're just doing what's best for their team. And then, but you're right. When it's two black guys, oh, it's an altercation. There's tempers flaring. Why can't it be the same, right? That's the kind of dumb stuff. And this is talking about Skip and divisiveness. And this is the thing. If Skip were still doing this show with Shannon, not even, I shouldn't even just say if he's doing it with Shannon, but let's just use Shannon as the example because that's the white and black dynamic. Could you imagine them leading off Undisputed with this particular talking point? Because it's worth the conversation, at least, right? I mean, it's not because it's preseason football and it's the first glimpse that we're seeing with Stroud and Diggs in some capacity. So it's not noteworthy to me, but the interaction itself is going to be noteworthy because, again, like you mentioned, when race is involved, and to think that it doesn't matter, and the thing that it does, or to think that it doesn't play some part in how the just like the sheer optics of it, you can say that you don't see color. That's cool, and we can appreciate that. But if you can't see how it's viewed, that's kind of where the problem lies. But a 20-12 victory for the Houston Texans, I guess that's good. I mean, again, it's preseason, so I'm I guess before we get out of here, I'm looking on the fence to see what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk. I know that the Steelers, with them being mentioned with the Texans game, to see if that's really going to go through. I know there's been some, from what it sounds like, uh, this deal is essentially done. There's some semantics that are in some logistical things that are trying to be taken care of. But Nick says Justin Fields ain't him either. I know what he's doing. I know what he's doing. I know what he's doing. Uh, I'll ask while you're here, Nick, and we'll. Justin Fields to me is not going to be the starter week one. I feel like it's going to be Russell Wilson for the Steelers, and but if they get Brandon Ayuk, if because there's always a potential holdup. There's always something. I remember when Antonio Brown it was a done deal for him going to Buffalo. And then that got nixed. But it sounds like for when I hear the teams that have been in the position to get Ayuk, it's been Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and New England were the real heavy hitters. And New England, because Ayuk apparently, from what I understand, has a no trade clause, and I wouldn't want to go to New England either, not just because of the weather, but because two rookie quarterbacks, and you don't know if either one of them is going to be good. That division is going to be bonkers. But if the Steelers were able to get Ayuk as well, along with having Pickens and Freiermuth, from what I understand, was one of the pieces I was kind of holding up the deal because that's who San Francisco wanted. They want to have Freiermuth incorporated in the trade. And from what I understand, and I don't know if it's true or not because there's too many smoke and too many mirrors in the offseason, is that Freiermuth was considered untouchable along with George Pickens. And I feel like what they were looking to do is they know that Kittle is one, he's been broken when you really look at statistical values because like he's a football player, right? Kittle's a football player, but his receiving stats, he's only had really one or two really great years. Otherwise, he's broken, or they're using him in other ways for the football team itself to be successful. But they're saying, well, Freiermuth's kind of like diet George Kittle. and they're like, well, we're not just going to give you a second George Kittle. We don't even have diet George Kittle because we can't really use him the same way. But I like the fact that if they're able to keep Freiermuth and they can get Brandon Ayuk, the Steelers, again, I don't think Justin Fields starts the season. I think it's going to be Russell Wilson. And it's not necessarily because it's Justin Fields needs to learn, because what Packers fans have been telling me forever is just, we'll do it our way. I feel like you kind of lucked out with quarterbacks more than anything else, because getting 3 in a row and getting 3 in a row where you drafted them, they're going to push the narrative that if you do it our way, that's the recipe for success. When in reality, you just lucked out 3 times in a row. The Colts kind of have done the same thing as well. Except for the offensive line and Andrew Luck's body broke him. It just failed him. But I feel like Justin Fields will be good if they can get Ayuk. If you can keep Pickens, get Ayuk, keep Freiermuth, a pretty good 1-2 combo at running back. I mean, your offensive line is still trash. But everything else, man, I think Pittsburgh could be a team to look out for. Not to win the Super Bowl. I think I need to preface that with everything. Anything that I say when it comes to my predictions is it's still Kansas City in the AFC, and everybody else is just kind of vying for second. Baltimore, Cincinnati, Houston, Buffalo, Miami, New York. There's so many teams that could surprise you as far as getting to an AFC Championship game. But as long as Patrick Mahomes doesn't die, and even then, I'm not even sure if that's the end all be all of the Chiefs' success. But as long as 15's under center and Andy Reid's still coaching, I'm still picking the Chiefs to at least represent, at least in the AFC Championship game for that. But the AFC is stacked. So if they were to get the Steelers, that is, if they were able to get Ayuk, it improves their chances, obviously. It opens up running lanes. You get another wide receiver. George Pickens goes from your number 1 to your number 2, or however you want to look at them. I feel like either one of them is a viable number 1 candidate. But if you have 2 number 1s, that's awesome, because you're usually going 3 and 4 wide receiver set anyways. You're going to need 2 real viable candidates, and the Steelers would then have that. So Justin Fields, I think, is going to take over the starting position at some point. And it's all circumstantial, right? Like let's say that Pittsburgh gets off to one of those goofy starts where they're 6-2, even if Russ is playing like absolute dog, right? Russ is just playing like absolute cheeks, but you're 6-2. These coaches are too scared to make a decision. And this is what I've said this like 2 or 3 years ago on one of my podcasts, was one of the most underrated decisions and moves of all time was Bill Belichick not wanting to go back to the guy that he paid. He's, I'm going to stick with Tom Brady, the 6th round draft pick. I don't have to go back. I don't care what my salary is. We see that all too. Pete Carroll's another one where he's like, I know I just paid Matt Flynn, but whoops, made a mistake. They're too scared to make that big decision. So that's the interesting thing for me when it comes to Pittsburgh, is I feel like they're going to go with the veteran quarterback, right? Let's go ahead and keep Russell Wilson under center for now. But if he's playing like trash and they're still winning, is Tomlin willing to switch it up? Or is it go back to the old narrative of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? So I just don't know which version of Russ you're going to get, one, because he's in his mid-30s. He doesn't have the arm strength. They got fast wide receivers, and he doesn't have the same mobility that he used to have. Justin Fields has all of that. He has all the mobility, all the arm strength. I feel like you can get a little bit, you get the happy feet, right? Now, me saying all this also has to go hand in hand with the division they play in. Now, you can't hyperanalyze and go so hyperbolic on the other side where you say, we can't be so scared because, well, we've got the Browns and the Bengals. And I always do this with the AFC North for whatever reason. I'm talking about the Steelers, the Browns, Bengals. Why do I always do this? Browns, Bengals, Ravens. So you get to that point, you got those other 3 defenses, right? You can't be so scared to not play Justin Fields because you're worried about how he's going to play in a 6-game stretch. That's a third of your season, essentially, right? You play 17 games. That's a third of your schedule. You can't be so scared to not play Justin Fields that he'll be broken because he can't read those defenses when he might be able to get you the dubs that Russell Wilson can't. It's going to be an interesting dynamic in Pittsburgh because I feel like between their defense and if you get Ayuk, that's a sneaky squad, man. But how are you going to handle the quarterback room, especially because when you look at Russ, Russ isn't getting paid jack by the Steelers. So they don't really have this commitment that they have to play him even for the money reason, because all too often we'll see these quarterbacks get played when they shouldn't just because the money's too high. Sometimes in the NBA, it's the exact same thing where, these guys are making too much money, or he's a star player or used to be. We've got to play him. The Steelers don't owe Russell anything. So if he is playing like trash, and even if you're still winning, maybe you switch it up. I don't know. But Nick said, I don't want him to die. Oh, as opposed in reference to Patrick Mahomes. I don't want him to die, but maybe a broken ankle. And it says, got to run the ball. I'm going to listen on Apple when you get it up. So he's going to head out. But yeah, so I mean, it's, to me, Pittsburgh, the whole run the ball thing, I think is an antiquated thought process of football as well. That's the way that we used to look at things in the 90s, the early 2000s, 90s, and beforehand. It was, you got to run the ball, set the pass. This is not how any of this works now. You can have a trash run offense and still be legitimate. The thing is, can you circumstantially do it though? That's always been my point, is when you need to get the yards, can you do it? And I've been catching some heat a little bit because I have had, my take has been, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are being extremely undervalued based on the fact that they really imploded last year. But then the fact that when you bring in guys like Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, that's where I think that this is where the rubber meets the road now. Is so Nick Sirianni. I'm gonna wrap it up after this, but I want to talk this Eagles topic because I feel like this is something that isn't being talked about enough. Is that Nick Sirianni was looked at as this great coach, right? Him and Adam Gase had kind of similar trajectories initially. They had goofy press conferences when they first came out. There was some question marks, and then you start to see flashes of, well, the team's really responding. And of course, with Nick Sirianni, he goes to Super Bowl, he loses, but they play really well in it. Last year, they get off to a great start, but it feels kind of fabricated. It doesn't feel like it feels disingenuous, right? We talked about this with the Vikings a couple of years, I think a year before him. So 2 years ago, when they got off to an 11-1 and 2-12 start, something just absurd. But all their games were 3-point games. And there was always this empty feeling of, this isn't sustainable. This isn't who you are. Because I feel like that's an important thing too. Have I seen this from you before and for 3 and 4 years? That's why, for me, I always pick the Ravens are going to be at least in the divisional round. The Chiefs are always going to be in the divisional round or the AFC Championship game. Like, there's certain things, the patterns there where I can say, I trust this. And winning games that way and doing it in one season, the thing that I used to use 3 years ago was when the Raiders won a bunch of close games or the Giants won a bunch of close games. And everyone's saying that's how you win football games. I'm saying, no, you have to have the ability to win them that way. But if all you're doing is winning them that way, that is not a recipe for success. So saying that you have to run the ball to set the pass or just win in general is an antiquated way of thinking about football, I believe. But it is the circumstance of, to go back to Philly for a moment, I feel like they're going to be fine because Nick Sirianni, when they were great, he wasn't calling any of the plays. And then they fire their OC, they fire their DC, and then now they got Kellen Moore, who you can have your trepidations about Kellen Moore because the Cowboys at least have been good on offense, right? And when you look at them, they're built very similar. Offensive lines are good, have good skill position guys, and then now you've got Now you even have Saquon Barkley in the building, which means that your tush push doesn't have to be as effective, or you don't have to use it as much. And Vic Fangio on the defensive side, I don't think you're going to see that slip on the defense that you saw at the end of last year. I do think the Eagles are going to be good, and they're going to be a problem, man. They're going to be a problem. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and hang it up for the day. You have been chopping with P. Scott. You guys know the drill. You can like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews wherever you get your audio listening pleasures, where all podcasts are available for free. We're going to go ahead and hang it up for the day. Stay up, stay blessed. Catch you guys on the next one.